Alright guys, part 2 of the BECs, and it's showtime here. If you have any questions from part 1 I might have left out or something, make sure you check this out, because I probably will cover it in this last part here. So now we're going to go with, first, do I need a BEC or not? And second, we've already covered is how you want to install it off your main pack or off of a separate. And I'll tell you how I base my decision on that, and I'll tell you how I base my decision on when I need one, when I believe I need one. Okay, so let's just say we've got our speed control picked out. Okay, you've got your BEC picked out. Now if you have any questions on what type of BEC you think you should run, leave me a comment, write me a message, anything you guys want, get a hold of me anyway, and I'll be more than happy to help you figure out what kinds would be beneficial for you to run. So let's get into the good dirty work here and get some stuff fired up. Okay, now, like I said, guys, switches, I'm not a big fan of switches. Ever since the Nitro days, I never have been a fan of switches. I've seen lots of planes go down because of that little black box right there. So I always eliminate switches. Now, in most cases, guys, and listen to me closely, in most cases, and check this, get a multimeter, check this, okay, guys? But in most cases, when you remove a switch, okay, you're going to want to connect the two wires together. You're going to want to solder them together. And this will leave the circuit open. This will allow it to basically say that switch is on. I don't use switches to turn on and off my BECs. I plug in and unplug my LiPo packs. That's how I do mine. And as you can see, my LiPo pack here, it comes with a huge gauge wire. No reason for that on a 7.4 volt. I just solder right in a JST connector, just like that. That's how most BECs come, and if they don't come that way, that's the connector I put on them anyways. So those are the connectors I choose to run. You don't need to run something like a big EC3 or EC5 or a Dean's or nothing like that for a BEC. All the way up to, you can get in, I'm trying to think of gauges here, probably 18 gauge would be a good gauge wire, to go with on a BEC. The lower the better, but you don't want to get too big of a wire, or then you start running into resistance, and that's a whole nother story. So for right now, we'll just cover that. Sorry guys, step out for a second there. Okay, so let's get into the business here. Now, when do you need one? There's two ways I determine if I need a BEC. First of all, the expense of the plane and the components. If it is something rather expensive, and everybody has their own line of expense, that's when I determine a BEC. For example, this is a Wingsmaker X35, and I know y'all love the pretty stickers, but until I have a plane 100% dialed in, with throws, with electronics, with servos, with everything, I never do anything really to it externally. The only thing I did was black out the canopy on this. But this is done with all of its testing. I've got it set up the way I want it. I've got the speed control, the BEC, the packs, the balance points, everything. This thing's ready to go. So soon I will go ahead and rip off all my stickers, and I will put a paint job on this. Of course, a couple stickers I don't rip off. I always put silver dot stickers on my CG points, and a lot of times I'll leave them there through painting on the bottom of the wing, so that I have 2 dots to always check my CG at the field if I have any questions on something, if I have to change out a speed control or change out something. So let's get into it. We're going to start with an easy one over here, guys. The Corsair, the Park Zone Corsair. Now, would I run a BEC in a Park Zone Corsair? No, I would not. My rule of thumb, and it's not because of expense here, it's because of servo count, okay? In most Park Zones, they run the elevator and the rudder off Metal Gear servos, and actually digital Metal Gear servos. But it's real hard to find the specs on Park Zone servos. I have them saved somewhere on the computer. But normally, I've flown the hell out of this plane for well over a year or so, and never ran a BEC pack on it, and never had a problem with it. So it's just your determination. Now, I turned this into a test plane. This is my little crash test dummy here. This has a hole in the back area here which will extends out basically the shaft from an arrow, from a compound bow and arrow, the aluminum shaft, and I can put a cam on it so that you can see the entire plane in flight. Okay, so with something like that, and then I've also put an FAA lighting system on it, so there's something that's drawing more power. Okay, and I'm planning on putting in flaps. That's going to draw more power, 2 more servos. Okay, so the more power I pull from this thing, the less confident I am that Park Zone's a little 30 amp speed control right there, which once again doesn't even give you the BEC rating at all. Just says it can take a 3 to 4S LiPo. Man, you're really pushing it if you try a 4S with that thing. But they don't give you the ratings or anything like that, so I go off of expense. If it's an expensive model, it's getting a good BEC. Or if it's a model that's running 4 standard servos or more, 4 or more, I'm throwing a BEC in it regardless. But you got to remember, guys, I run numbers on everything. A watt meter that plugs into your LiPo and then into your speed control is a must-have for electric flyers. This tells me what, at full throttle, half throttle, whatever, this tells me how many watts I'm pulling, how many amps I'm pulling, what the level of my battery is, what the peak of everything was. I mean, if you're getting into electric flight and you don't have a watt meter, that you need to get one of these. These can save a plane. These are amazing. And guys, the price of it, just think about it compared to the price of a plane. This one was from Nitro Planes, and this is the P0, and they have the P1. The P1 is considered the better brand. I got the P0 because they were out of stock on the P1, and I love this thing. It is perfect. It's dead on all the time. I don't have any problems with it, so I use it on every single plane I run. Okay, so let's get into the dirty work here, guys. Okay, so in here, I just threw in a flight pack, a little 3-cell, I mean, because this is just for an example. So I'm not running my normal flight pack, which would normally stick out to about here. Okay, now in this plane, no big deal. You know, I'm just running extra servos, extra some lights, you know, stuff like that, and anything else I may decide to put or not put on it. You know, so in this one, I'm just running a simple Hobby King 5 volt, 5 amp, external BEC. That's it. Okay, guys, now on this one I do have it hooked up, as you can see from my speed control here, guys. Here's my speed control wire coming out, and I just ran it under some foam and taped the foam back in. Okay, and there it is. There's the wire. The center wire has been taken out, heat shrunked over, and hot glued in. Now that's how I typically do it, guys, and away from any type of source, as far away from any type of source that would interfere with the receiver as I can. So that is going in to the receiver. If I can get the light on here, there we go. That is going into the receiver right there. As you can see, there are only 2 wires going into that. So that part's taken care of. We've eliminated the internal BEC. So now I've got my external BEC right here. Okay, and it follows around a very ugly tape loop there. Okay, and plugs right in to the, on the Spectrum here, the bind and battery port, okay, which is right in front of the throttle on Spectrum receivers. So I've got it in the battery port. We're good there. Every speed control should come with a, or every BEC and speed control should come with a ferret ring or a ferret or kind of clamp tubes. You can get those too. I choose the rings, that way I can add wraps to it if I need to. But keep your noise down, your frequency noise, and I'll explain that here in a second. So there it is, running into my receiver, into the battery slot, runs out, and I've got it taped up right here in front, right below the hole where I can get some air to it, because the #1 reason a BEC will fail you, an external BEC fails, is due to excessive heat. You gotta keep these things cool. I mean, you don't have to baby them, but you gotta keep them cool, and you don't want to bring the plane in, throw a pack in it, and take it back up 5 times in a row. You're gonna run a risk of overheating that BEC, and it's gonna, if it has a safety mechanism, it'll turn it on, it'll shut itself off. It would rather save its, you know, $5, $10, $50 self than your couple $100 plane. So we've got that hooked up and installed there. Okay, and then like I said, guys, I always choose to run mine off of a separate LiPo. So on the other side of the BEC, make sure I grab it right. It's been a while since I've flown this one, guys. Okay, there is my JST connector, like I told you I run. So we'll go ahead and plug that in. Let me turn the transmitter on. Okay, transmitter is on to the F4U Corsair. So I'll go ahead and plug that pack in real quick, guys. And let me set this back here so you can see how you'll know when the pack has been plugged in. Hopefully, if you can see the plane. Alright, we'll figure something out here, guys. We'll figure something out. There we go. Alright, there we go, guys. Okay, so here's my flight pack. It's not even hooked up. It's not hooked up at all. All I'm doing now is hooking my LiPo battery to my BEC. Another reason I love to run packs instead of running it linear, or instead of running it in line with my flight pack. Okay, so I'm going to hook this up. Alright, I don't know if you guys can see the lights are blinking away there. Okay. And I'm just setting it in here, guys. This isn't how I pack my stuff in. I do a lot cleaner job than this. But, okay, here's my flight pack, guys. It's not even hooked up. Here's my speed control. Not hooked up to my battery, okay? So, with an external LiPo as your backup, okay? Now I have nothing hooked up to it, but I have full control of everything, okay? I can turn my lights on and off, you know, and I got a strobe in the back there. You know, I can do any function you want that you normally have with your LiPo hooked up, except for throttle. Nothing happens. So then I would hook my throttle up to it, and we are ready to go. This thing's ready to take off. You know, that's just one of the reasons I like to run a separate LiPo pack, because you can keep a monitor on it, okay? It'll power your BEC, it'll power your whole system. I usually don't even think twice, even on this small pack, 800 milliamp, 7.4 volt pack, 10C. I never think twice about putting 5-6 flights on this pack at all. I do check it in between flights, but I can always get 5 or 6 flights out of it before I even have to think about recharging it. So it's not a problem. So we're fired up, guys. Even though we've got that battery in there, we don't need it. Okay, as you can see. So let's just pretend something happened in the air and our main flight battery, we lost it. Main flight battery fried, or the speed control fried. Well, if the main battery fried and you're hooked into that, you're kind of screwed. But if anything else on the plane failed, well, you still got that LiPo running that BEC that's pushing that 5 volts and 5 amps in this situation to the receiver. So I have still got full function of everything I need to land this plane, and more juice than that if needed. So, you know, not an issue at all, guys. This thing's good to go. So that's the way I run mine. I'll go ahead and kill this real quick. I should be able to do this one hand. Alright, so there. Now it's unplugged, and obviously we have nothing anymore. So that's the way I run that BEC. Eliminate the middle wire, okay, and run it either to a separate LiPo pack or in line with your flight pack, okay, and you are good to go. Your BEC is hooked up. Now, an additional feature I like to run are these right here. These are ferrite capacitors, guys. And really it's not necessary, but it's kind of a peace of mind. This is a smaller one for the Corsair. I don't need a very large one. Basically, the ferrite capacitor here, and you can find these anywhere, local hobby shops, online. It just plugs into your receiver, and it can actually plug in anywhere. If you have an open Y connector anywhere on the plane, even in the back servo or something like that, as long as it plugs into the system, it goes through the whole system. And what this does, guys, is a lot of you know with the Spectrums, if they drop below that 3.5, 3, whatever number they're making up these days, that voltage that makes them cut off, okay? Now, a lot of times it just takes that for a millisecond for that receiver to reboot. And if you're not lucky enough to get an instant reboot or a reboot within a couple seconds, I hope you're really high up because you lost that plane. Now, what the capacitor does is, if this does get that millisecond drop in voltage, which running a BEC, it shouldn't, but if it did, okay, what this does is right when you plug in your battery, this builds a charge into it, okay, kind of like a starter solenoid inside of a starter, the little can solenoid there. It holds that charge, and what happens is if this drops for a second, this capacitor dumps everything it's got into the receiver to keep it alive long enough to survive that low voltage situation. It will not keep your receiver alive more than a couple seconds. This is only a couple second fix. If it's going to be a problem to where you're really low voltage, you're going to be screwed whether or not you have that. Okay, so let's go over here to the jet. Okay, same situation here, guys. Okay, I got my speed control. Remember, this is a mess. I am in the process of redoing this. Apologize. This is a mess, but here's my speed control. Okay, there's my EC3 to plug in. Here's my flight pack right here to plug in. And then right in here is my BEC, and you'll notice that is a quite a bit larger BEC. Okay, now that one is the Align. That is what I run in my jets. Okay, it's got a good heat sink on the bottom to keep it cool. At the front of the jet here, there is an intake, which you can actually see it in there. Blows right over my BEC. This BEC doesn't even get warm in this X35. It's great. And another thing I forgot to mention about the Align, guys, is see right here at the top where you have the full 8 volt 7.5 7.6 empty. Okay, that stays lit up so bright that if it were in a balsa plane with normal covering, you could see that light from the ground. I mean, those LEDs in there are bright, so you always know how many more flights you have left on that external pack. Okay, now if you're running this on an internal pack, well, a different story. But external pack, these Aligns let you know how much juice you got in your little external battery, like the ones I like to run. So, same situation here, guys. What I've got underneath this mess of wires that I'm redoing right now, and we got to dig it out and find it. So what we'll do is we will just chase the speed control. Okay, there's the speed control wire there, and there. So here we go. There's the speed control wire, guys, and there we go. Shrink wrapped and off to the side is the middle wire. It has been eliminated. Now this one I'm running just a temporary. I'm running an Exceed Proton 40 amp, and right there on this one it does tell you finally BEC 5 volt 3 amp. Okay, so it's got a linear onboard BEC, and if you don't know, always suspect it does if you're hooking up a BEC pack. So there's my center wire. It has been removed. It has been heat shrunk and locked in there, and I think I did something else with this one because that's pretty hard. So and with this one I just kind of keep it tucked into the by the ferret ring there on that one. And so and as you can see, all these wires are right over my receiver, guys, and I can get some range. It's unreal out of this thing. So that one's hooked up, and then like I said, the BEC is right up front there, and I did that mainly for balancing and because that's where I had the room for it. So my flight pack goes in here, and all these lines you see drawn here, guys, are to keep my CG correct. If I'm using a 3S pack or a 4S pack, and if I'm using a 3 or 4S pack with a separate BEC pack, which, like I said, I do. So I put my basically I put my battery in there. It has strong Velcro on the bottom there. It stays in good and tight, and then all I do is I'll hook my BEC battery up, my BEC LiPo up, and I basically just shove it down in there next to the flight pack. Okay, guys? And usually I'll put a piece of real strong double-sided tape that I use on the side of it, put that in there, then I do my loop around it, Velcro it in, plug in my BEC to my BEC LiPo. Okay, and this one is set on a 6 volt setup because I am running digital servos throughout this whole jet, so I've got that on 6 volts. I'm running one for each aileron, one for each elevator, one for the rudder, which is buried down here in the belly of it. Okay, and eventually we'll be running 2 more for the rudders. This does not have movable rudders yet. So that's my setup on the jet there. I mean, that's simple. Remove your center wire from your speed control to your receiver. Okay, install the BEC of your choice. Remember, I would stick to 5 volt and a 5 volt 3 amp, at least 3 amp. And remember, the voltage goes off of your servos, guys. If you're running digital servos, knock that up to 6 volt. That's why I like the switchable, so you have an option. If you're running standard, 5 volt will be awesome. 3 amp is a must. I mean, that's a minimum. I like to have 5 volt 5 amp. That way I know I'm covered on all of my servos and anything else I may have running in a plane. And on my jet, I also run the ferrite capacitors, but on this one, I run a little bit larger one. Hopefully you guys can see this here. Now this is a 16 volt, 3,300 farad capacitor, okay? So this one will hold a little bit stronger and lengthier of a charge. It'll give me a little bit longer boost in case for some reason, like I said, some reason, I get low voltage to the receiver, okay? And remember guys, they can plug in anywhere on the plane as long as it's plugged in. It works throughout the system. And then I've got my receiver under here, and all these wires will not be on top. I know better than that. And then way down deep, even farther past my BEC, is the satellite to my receiver. So I make sure I've got that set up. So there are my typical setups, guys. That pretty much covers it. I mean, it's not real hard. I'm trying to think of any rules you should stick with. The main thing is keep it in a good ventilated area, keep it cool. Try and keep it standalone by itself, not interfering with anything. You know, you don't want your wires rubbing up against other wires that could cause interference. You know, and choose your method of installation, whether it's to your main flight pack or a separate LiPo. Your choice completely. I choose separate LiPo. And that's basically it, guys. And just make sure that you have the proper RF frequency noise reduction. You know, things on there like a ferrite ring or a snap-on ferrite clamp, just to basically keep the RF noise down. And the reason I'll tell you that, guys, is because, like, for example, this one here, this Turnigy UBEC 15 amp, okay, I know it says low RF noise right there. Trust me, the last thing this thing has is low RF noise. If this were a speaker, this would be a loudspeaker. They chose to case it in an aluminum case. Okay, that does not help on RF noise with an open board on the bottom. So this lets off a good amount of noise. So when this is installed in the J10, it's actually installed almost at the very, very front where there is nothing that I've got to worry about. And like I said, this switch is removed and eliminated. Now my voltage selection switch obviously is not. It is left alone, kept safe and against either the side of the plane or the front, somewhere to where nothing can slide into that switch and kick it. Okay? And remember guys, I told you this is a 5 volt and a 6 volt. Well, cool thing about this Turnigy BEC is this Turnigy BEC comes down and it has 2 outputs. Okay? And this is for running dual receivers. Okay? Or a receiver and a killer light system or a smoke system or retracts or anything like that. Both of these wires spit out the same amount of power that BEC states. So we're getting both of those. But let's say in like a heli situation, you got that tail rotor. Okay, that tail rotor servo. It's always the lower voltage servo. So the rest of your system needs 6 volts. Let's say it's all digital. You need 6 volts. But that one servo in the back, it's a 4.8 volt servo. Well, that's where this little step down comes in, and you can buy these separate from BECs all day long. It's just, it's just clipped into my other lead there. It comes out here, and this one takes it down an additional. This will basically take it from 6 volts to 5.1. So perfect to run a 4.8 volt servo, guys. That's well within the specs. They underspec everything for the caution part, and they overspec everything for the power part. So that's the only time you'd use a voltage step down. Now here's where we get into a fun part. Okay, on off. Now the aligned, the one I told you guys is my favorite. This is selectable, but it's not. Let me explain that. This is a 6 amp 6 volt UBEC. Okay, there's no little switch on here that lets me go to 5 volt. The only switch on here is right there, and it is the on off switch. So inside this BEC, it also has a step down wire. Okay, now since I'm running my BEC directly to my receiver, all I did, guys, was I took that step down wire right here, and that just has a safety guard on it so it won't pull free. I took that step down And on my main wire from my BEC to my receiver is where I put in that step down. So my entire receiver can receive the lower voltage if it needs to receive that. If it's just one servo, then you run this along that one servo line and you're good. But if you get a 6-volt BEC and but you want your whole system to run it at 5 volts, all you do is in between the BEC and the receiver, you plug in one of the little step downs there. And once again, in the heat shrink there are your capacitors that knock that down to 5.1 volts, which is, like I said, will not harm a 4.8 volt servo. So hopefully I covered everything. I know I went over things a few times, but there's, like I said, I learned the lesson the hard way by frying some electronics and losing a plane, many years ago, probably about 15 years ago, before the miracle of YouTube, where I could just type it in and look up and see how to do it. So I learned the hard way. So hopefully one of you guys out there doesn't have to learn the hard way. But that's the basic setup there, guys. Okay, so to cap off, we'll just use the easy one here. Okay, going to the receiver. That is your BEC going to the receiver. These two wires need to either go to a separate LiPo pack or to your main flight pack. Okay, and your speed control. Don't forget to pull the center wire out of your speed control. If you forget to pull that little center wire out of your speed control, it will consider that to be running in series, not in parallel. So if your speed control has a 5 volt 3 amp and your BEC is 5 volt 3 amp, well, you're going to be running 10 volt 6 amps, and your servos are going to burn out. Your receivers are going to burn. Well, your receiver might not. Most receivers can handle that, but you're going to be saying goodbye to quite a few electrical components and some toasted wires that won't be fun to replace. So I hope that helps out, guys. Any questions? I know I always leave something out of my videos. So any questions, guys, throw them at me. I'll get right on them. This is one of the most important parts of RC flying, in my opinion. I would still have my awesome black J10 that you guys saw the remnants of in the crash video that I also have posted of that. I would still have that jet if I had decided to go ahead and put a BEC in it. But for some reason, I ran my watt meter, the numbers came back good enough for me, and for some reason I chose not to. And that decision put me in a low voltage situation that shut down that Spectrum receiver, put it into reboot, and that reboot took too long. And that was about a little over $1,200 worth of gear in that plane. So that was an expensive mistake. So from that point on, I ordered a ton of different BECs for planes I fly now, for the proppies, for some of my jets, and for some of my larger jets that I will be running in the future, or twins, twin engine jets. This would be an excellent one for that as well. Just be careful of RF noise interference and all the pre-mentioned little warnings there, guys. Removing the middle wire. If you are not comfortable with switches, removing and soldering the switch, but check it first to see if you need to leave it open and desolder it from the board, or if you need to solder the two wires together. Okay, and then it's just up to you on the LiPo pack. You can ask me questions on why I prefer it, and I'll get back to you on why I prefer a separate LiPo pack. So I hope this helped you guys out, and hope explain and clear some stuff up. And good luck, and this will keep your bird in the air in case you run into a problem. So hit me up with any comments, questions, or anything like that, and I'll stop rambling on here. And hope this helps some of you beginners out there out. This can be a little bit of a confusing part of the electronics of an electronic plane. So, don't learn the hard way like I did. Save your money and watch me ramble on about BECs. So thanks for watching, guys, and go ahead and comment, subscribe, rate, and all that, and I'd appreciate it. Thanks.